Hello, everybody. Thanks again for joining us on another edition of Spincast here at Stay Plugged In. Joining us today, we have Gage Cash. He is the founder of AGN, American Gaming Network, LLC. Huge tournament provider. I've actually been fortunate enough to actually check out one of his events here locally in Charlotte. I believe it was a Call of Duty event. But anyway, just wanted to thank you so much for coming on. I sincerely appreciate it, and I'm hopeful that we can educate our audience a little bit more in this esports space. So without further ado, Gage, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of what led you down this pathway, what got you into esports in general, gaming, and what ultimately led you to get the idea going for AGN.
Yeah, so like you said, I'm Gage Cash. I'm the founder and owner of the American Gaming Network. It actually got started around 6 years ago during the summer, so it should be around 6 years. I don't know the exact day, but 6-year anniversary is basically going on right now is the way I look at it. But yeah, so the way it got started was actually I was on YouTube watching Nade Shots, X Games highlight video.
Okay.
And at the time, it was the summer before my senior year in high school. I was going to college to do a business major, business administration or management. I hadn't decided at that point. But I knew I wanted to get into the world of business some way, shape, form, fashion. My dad owns his own business. He owns an HVAC business here in Alabama. So it was kind of something that I had wanted to do since I was a kid. Ended up watching Nate Shot's video, kind of got my feet wet with the competitive Call of Duty scene. Ended up grabbing some of my buddies, and we played a couple tournaments, a couple GBs and stuff like that. I came across the Twitter esports community and the Call of Duty community, a couple guys, and ended up finding a couple of Twitter tournament pages.
Mm-hmm.
So we played in a couple of those. And once I started diving into it and looking at the logistics of it and how it was ran and things of that nature, I kind of, thought to myself, I was like, this ain't something that's too difficult to do. It's something that would fit something I have interest in. Because I'm obsessed with like leagues and stats and numbers and stuff like that. Like I'm actually playing a dynasty on NCAA. I was playing it before we started this, so just to give you an idea of how my mind works. Like I'm obsessed with sports and stats and things of that nature. So I was like, well, if I can do it on NCAA, I can bring that same kind of environment to Call of Duty. So I ended up starting, I want to say it was Sly Tournaments, I think, is the first tournament company name I actually had. And it was actually a team/company or a team/tournament company. And shortly after that, I rebranded to Shark Tournaments. So Shark Tournaments was my first ever like actual push at making this a business. We ran leagues, tournaments. I ran a thing every Sunday that was called the Ultimate Team Tournament, and it was just a weekly thing on Sunday where teams would come. It was free entry. It was no prize. It was literally playing for fun and bragging rights, and we had a good time with it. Like we got probably 24 to 32 teams every week consistently. And back then it was just for fun. I had a great group of guys that supported me and kind of gave me some ideas on how to make it bigger and better, and I ran with it. Eventually got to the point where I heard that LAN was a thing, and I brought a guy on named Tony to come work with me. And he actually knew what a LAN was. He had worked for eBash in Indianapolis, so he had LAN experience. We ended up calling eBash, getting some things set up. At that point, we were like, well, if we're going to take this serious, we need to rebrand into something other than a shark. So we chose the name the American Gaming Network, with him being, in Indianapolis, me being in Alabama. Kind of made sense. So we rebranded into AGN, and now we've hosted in Indianapolis next month will be our 10th LAN event. We've hosted, I don't know how many online tournaments, probably 25 to 50 online leagues for 3 or 4 different titles. So we do a little bit of everything. We do LANs, online, leagues, you name it, we can pretty much do it.
Yeah, understood. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you're one coming up in Indianapolis. That's got a pretty cool prize pool, $7,500.
It is. Yeah, 48 teams with a $7,500 prize pool.
Good deal. Good deal. That's awesome. So talk to me a little bit about your beginnings in respect to what are some of the most difficult hurdles? Because nothing's easy, right? It sounds like all cool, all easy, let me just do this and it's going to just work itself out. That's not normally the case, obviously.
Yeah.
But for you, what were some of the most difficult steps, if you look back over the first couple of years, that obstacles you had to overcome?
I would say some of the biggest, my biggest obstacle, and it's still something that I struggle with today, even is just like deciding to pull the trigger on it or to just kind of see how things goes. Like in the beginning, it was kind of something that I didn't want to put a lot of time into. I was attempting to try to get recruited and go play college football, which I ended up doing. But at the same time, I feel like that kind of, if I would have done more in it, AGN would be bigger now than it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I always look back and was like, man, if I would have pulled the trigger, and I have no regrets over what I did because I wouldn't be where I was, if things had went differently. But at the same time, it's kind of just like I feel like esports is a space where you need to take that leap of faith in some things. So I would say my biggest hurdle was probably just deciding what to do next, I guess, because I had some ideas for what would I think would work or what would be fun to watch or fun to host. So it was never really a problem of what do I do. It was more or less like, do I want to do it? So like if somebody was asking me what my biggest hurdle was and I had to give advice to them, I'd say like if you put your mind to something and you think you can do it and you think you would enjoy doing it, then do it. Because at the end of the day, like I'm 6 years later wishing I would have done 6 years ago what I'm doing now. So I would say my biggest hurdle would basically be my mind, like, and having to overcome the mental aspect of the unknown, I guess.
Gotcha. Well, congrats to you because you did do it, and you are one of the very few in the population that decides that they have the cojones to go out and start their own business
Yeah.
and go with it. So congrats, because ultimately you made the right choice. I think this is such a growing space, and event providers such as AGN are fantastic for people to kind of gravitate towards. Now, you have a couple of game titles that I saw on your website that you typically run your tournaments around: Call of Duty, Rainbow Six. Any other games predominantly, or really you just focus on those two?
Well, we ran one LAN event for Rocket League back in February that had a pretty decent turnout. But Rocket League's got so many terms of services and things, it's kind of tricky to get in and stay in. We ran we ran a couple tournaments and leagues for Madden.
Mm-hmm.
We did a couple of Fortnite tournaments back in the day, probably 2 years ago when it was really blossoming and it was more kill race than these custom matches.
Mm-hmm.
But recently, with Valorant being released, today actually marked the day one of our first season of an online league for Valorant. So we basically try to stay in Call of Duty and Rainbow Six, and then I think Valorant's a pretty fun game, and I enjoy watching it. So I was like, well, let's give it a shot. So
How many people you have in your league so far for Valorant? I know that's a brand spanking new. Obviously, the beta form has been out, but now it's fully out.
yeah, we have 24 teams currently in season one.
Awesome, awesome. So for someone in, say, middle school, high school that's looking to get on and practice and play against good competition, what do you recommend they do? And here's what I mean by that. Lots of times, I think there's somewhat of a disconnect between parents and kids in respect to, hey, if you're pretty good at something, you got to practice it. You talked about football, for
Yeah.
example. You probably spent a good portion of your life in terms of time practicing football just so you can get an opportunity to play collegiately. So what advice would you give for someone who's a pretty good gamer?
I would say, well, especially typically for the younger kids, is like I think you mentioned, it was it's kind of difficult now. Like a lot of people don't really understand the space, and it's growing, and it's a hard thing to kind of wrap your head around. Like I was even trying to describe this to my fiance at the time, and she like we've been together for a year and a half, and she doesn't understand it. She still don't get it. So the biggest thing for kids, you're going to have that same approach, and you're probably going to have to tell your parents what the space is. So the way I would look at it would be, if you don't play any sports or anything like that, come home, do your homework, do what your parents ask of you, and then spend a couple hours on the game as your practice, like any athlete would.
Mm-hmm.
If you play sports, then continue doing that, and then come home and do the same thing. Do your chores, do your homework, take the dog out if he has to go, take a shower, and then hop on the game for a couple hours with your friends or whatever. Just, I would say, treat it like it is an actual sport, and that goes to players or someone that maybe wants like a management role or a streamer or a content creator, somebody that's maybe not good at games, but they have a good personality and enjoy playing. You have to just treat it like any other athlete would their sport, basically, or how any businessman would treat his business or whatever.
Yeah, no doubt. Dude, you have no idea. I'm going to record this specific segment just so I can play back for my kids because I 100% agree. You got
Yeah.
to have balance, right? Just like anything in life,
Right.
you got to have balance. And if you have good balance, I actually think it helps create a more solid foundation and less burnout if you have
Mm-hmm.
that good balance. So,
Yep.
how do you determine from a tournament perspective kind of where to go next, how to advertise for it? Talk about the ins and outs of trying to attract people to your tournaments. How do you go about doing that? It is all literally just driven through your website, or how does that happen? For example, you had the event in Charlotte.
Yeah.
How does something like that all to come together? The one in Indianapolis that's coming up.
It's a mixture of things. It's a mixture of like, well, first you have to look at, are you new to the scene or do you have a reputation already built?
Mm-hmm.
So like, what I'll do is I'll compare our Call of Duty and Valorant because, like I said, Valorant's new and we've been in Call of Duty for 6 years essentially. So when I first got into Call of Duty, I found those Twitter turning pages and I started going through their following or people they would reply to and things like that. And I'd be like, trying to associate with those people. So the first step, and then players of young age can take this advice and apply it to how they should make connections, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
is just you need to find the right people to associate with. So find those people within the community that you want to play with or the people whose organization you may want to be a part of, whatever, and just follow them on Twitter, follow them on social media. Just try to have some type of engagement, whether it be like a fan or from just a player to player perspective. So the first thing we do is we try to engage with our audience essentially. Um, I try to contact org owners on a daily basis, no matter who it is. And I've actually, over the past year, I've probably developed a lot of good, outstanding relationships with a lot of org owners, and that's carried me a long way. I've developed a sense of trust where, respectfully, I don't think anybody in the community has a lot of bad to say about me, just because I try to always make things right. I try to do the right thing, and I try to make sure, like, if something's not going wrong, if not something's not going right, to take care of it or make up for it in some way somehow.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would say just find the right audience to engage with, and then after that, it's all about staying there. Build a reputation and then keep it. So that's what I did for Call of Duty. I was able to interact with a bunch of new players who were all probably around my age at the time or younger. And then the org owners were probably the same. Esports 6 years ago was a lot different than it is now.
No doubt.
I was able to interact with those guys and, basically treat it like friends essentially, opposed to a business relationship. And that went a long way. So, I was able to build up our reputation through Call of Duty, just doing the same thing over and over and over. And then when it came to Valorant, I basically had to do it all over again. But this time, I contacted the org owners that I already had a relationship with, so that trust was there. And once they joined the league, I had a couple organizations who are brand new, and they were like, "Hey, how do I know you're not going to take my money and just run?" I was like, "Well, why don't you reach out to these guys, as references essentially, and be like, ask them. They know what we're about and what we're going to do and stuff like that." So yeah, and then you get into the marketing side, and that's just a different beast because you have Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and they're all different. Like we market everything through Twitter to where we can get 1 million impressions in a month, and then we go to Instagram and we can't get 10 likes on a post. So it's the same thing with Facebook too. Like, so I'm still trying to figure those out. Still trying to figure out Instagram and stuff, but it takes time. It takes a lot of practice and trial and error. And so if you're new, the way I would look at it is find somebody who's successful and watch them. Just watch how they do, how they operate, whether that be a player, a streamer, a sponsorship guy for an org or something like that. I would just take notes. And I think the biggest thing that helped me with playing collegiate football for a couple of years was I was able to take a lot of things that we did there and translate it to esports. And it helped me wrap around things on like why this is happening, why he's doing this, and how I can grow as a business owner, and as a person as well. So like things that I did, so like football, for example, you're going to watch film and take notes.
Mhm.
It's the same thing in business or, as a player or whatever, you watch what your other colleagues are doing, take what you like and apply that to your game. So like if a little kid's 7 years old and watching Tom Brady, what he's doing is training, he's going to come back and do that same thing. Where an esports player could basically do the same thing, whether, he's 13 years old, just playing Fortnite for the first time. He's like, well, how do I get better? He cuts on Ninja or Shroud or somebody, watches what he does, and then applies that to himself too. So I would say that's the biggest thing is just take notes, learn what you can by watching other people, and just develop something that works for you. And that's, make sure your brand or yourself is very unique and something that sets you apart from everybody else.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So for AGN, if obviously where you started, and you alluded to this, 6 years ago, the esports scene was massively different than what it is today. There's no doubt about that. But let's look forward a little bit. So what are your objectives? What are your goals as we continue to grow in this space, as AGN continues to grow? Obviously, you do quite a bit throughout this area in the Southeast, all the way up through Indianapolis, et cetera. Is this something you want to do a little bit more nationally? Are you happy with the niche you have here? What are your plans?
Uh, it's a little bit of both. The ideal would be to kind of open up a couple. I don't really want to say centers like land centers,
Mhm.
but I would say maybe more or less offices,
Mhm.
like satellite offices across the United States, to where we have, to where like if we wanted to host a land there, we would already have a connection within that community and that city or town. And it wouldn't be that big of a deal. It wouldn't be having to go into a new location and trying to meet new people and make new connections and things like that. It would be a lot easier to get feet on the ground and, have those personal relationships to where we can hit the ground running as soon as we wanted to develop something. And I've kind of taken that approach too. Like I touched on earlier, it's the American Gaming Network for a reason, essentially, because I don't want to be centralized.
Mhm.
I feel like that's something that kind of sets AGN apart. And I have great respect for all these guys that I work with, but like you're friends with CJ, but they're more Charlotte based.
Right. No doubt.
The guys at AFD, they're Florida based. Ishoni in Texas, they're kind of Texas based. SoCal, Southern California. And I feel like that's what makes AGN unique is we have the ability to go here and there and everywhere. Um, so I'm able to connect with people all over the country. We've hosted now, I want to say 5 or 6 different states. Um, I've got relationships with people in Ohio and Indiana and Illinois, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Florida. So it's a little bit of both. Like as far as me, myself, and I'd love to have a home base set up with, a streaming station over here and my office space here, and then a space for gamers to come in and play if they want to or stream whatever. But then at the same time, I also want to have that same thing everywhere to where I can interact with people all over the country.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for our viewers and people that are listening, I think the model of success for you certainly has been, obviously you had courage to pull that trigger, as you mentioned early on. You didn't do it when you wanted to, but ultimately you still did pull that trigger. You were persistent, obviously, in communicating with all the org owners, et cetera. But then you had a game plan. You kind of developed that game plan as you persisted in this space, and now obviously you've got the sight, the vision, if you will. Looking forward to see how this can really map out as an even greater endeavor for you there at AGN. So that's fantastic. I think it's important. Those are numbers of different steps, if you will, that it does take to be successful in life and business and relationship, et cetera. And I think you've covered a number of those. So that's awesome for our group that's listening. Last question is kind of a two-pronged question. I'll let you get rolling. But it's not all easy, as I mentioned earlier. So if you don't mind, share 2 stories. One, your horror story of an event that just didn't work well for you. And
All right.
then your best event, some of the, or your, maybe not your best event, but maybe your best memory potentially from an event that really still sticks with you to this
Okay. Well, I can kind of touch on both right here.
day.
It was actually Asian in Chicago back in 2019, January 4th, 2019. Um, my best memory from esports and AGN in general was we spent all summer planning that LAN event. And we really didn't know what to expect. We had seen people tweeting like, hey, um, I'm looking for a team for Chicago. We're looking for a team to represent our organization, things like that. And it was like kind of seeing the same people over and over and over. And we spent 5 months. I think it was like 4.5 months before passes went on sale, and we were just kind of like, we don't know what to expect. The guys we were partnering with for the event that provided all the equipment, they had tried to host their own event at the same venue for the same prize pool. I think about 2 months before I reached out and contacted them. And they had 6 people show up, not teams. They had 6 people. So on top of me running my first LAN event in 2 years, or AGN running our first LAN event in 2 years, and then that we were like, bro, I don't know, and they're panicking too. They're like, guys, what if this don't work? Like, we need something concrete. Like, this is a backup plan. I was like, we're not creating a backup plan until it's finalized, like until we know how it's going down. So we had a World War II summer league that ended. We announced Chicago on stream after that for like 100-something people. Got some pretty good feedback from it. So we were, we had high hopes going in. 3 months later in October, I get out of class about 2:30, 2:45, coming back to my dorm room, and pass is going to sell at 3 o'clock. We sold out in less than 60 seconds.
Wow.
And I honest to God, cried in my dorm room.
That's awesome.
Mind blown. And I called Tony and I was like, hey, I think we just sold out. He was like, what? I said, refresh the page. And he was like, bro, holy crap. And then I was like, I got to make sure this is real. I log in, check PayPal, all the money's there. I was like, oh my God. So that's probably my best memory. And then the LAN comes around, and there's actually another LAN that same day in New Jersey, is ETG. So New York, ETG, sorry. Mm-hmm. And their LAN event was the same day. We get there at 6 a.m. We unload, have everything ready to go. I think we were planning on having like 3 hours to unload and everything. And we actually got done in like 45 minutes, like the whole thing. So we were set up way ahead of time. Could have got the LAN started early, all this. Players get there, start lining up. We get all the teams in, have them sit down. We deal with blue screens for 3 hours. On top of that, the venue told us we had to be out by 9 o'clock. So we're running like one and done losers bracket, which is, I hate it. I never wanted to do that in my life, but had to do it. Didn't really have a choice. So that's going on. We get delayed 3 hours essentially. And then, everybody knows we got to be out by 9 o'clock. We've preached it this whole time. And then, so like a couple org owners are coming up to me like, bro, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. I really don't have a clue. Because it wasn't going to finish on time. So eventually the manager of the venue came up to me and said, hey, we're going to close this area off. You can stay past 9 o'clock. And I was like, okay, great. Well, then it ends up going, and then like a second best of 5 happens in grand finals. We get out of there at like 2 o'clock. So altogether, it was a fun event. It was really, really good. But just 3 hours of blue screens, having to deal with a venue that said you have to be out by this time, and then changing their mind and then changing their mind again. It was just a big headache. That was actually the first LAN event that I personally ran. And then we come to, Charlotte back in February, and that was just the smoothest thing I could have ever imagined. So it was like literally 2 different worlds. But yeah, so my best experience, or my best memory and my worst experience, all came from the same event.
That's pretty funny. That's stressful as it is, but that comes with the territory, as you know already. I'm sure every event, no matter what, is stressful, but that's probably because you're particular in making sure that it's a great event. So that's going to be normal. So again, this is Gage Cash. We sincerely appreciate you taking some time telling us a little bit more about the American Gaming Network. Folks, check them out, www.americangamengnetworkllc.com. They have an event coming up in Indianapolis. Some more coming up in the fall that you can preview, or not sure yet based on COVID-19?
We have one hopefully in Birmingham. The Birmingham mayor is kind of being really strict right now to what the governor is saying.
Yep.
So really it just depends. I want it to happen. It's supposed to have double the prize pool of Indy. Wow. But like I said, it kind of depends on how everything's going. And if anything, I'll push that back and then maybe do a kickoff event there for next year. So
yeah, understood. Different times for sure. No doubt about it. So again, sincerely appreciate you taking the time. We certainly wish you all the best. Hopefully we'll circle back with you a little bit down the road, and hopefully we'll see you in Charlotte again. So
that's the plan.
Appreciate it. Yeah, awesome. Thanks again. Have a great night, and thanks for coming on Stay Plugged In with us for another edition of Spincast. Have a great night.
Absolutely. Thank you.